Dr. Dan Cohen is a neurologist turned inventor who's on a mission to solve one of the greatest performance killers in business today: poor sleep. A serial entrepreneur with multiple exits, including the public company CNS and the revolutionary Breathe Right nasal strips, Dan brings a rare mix of medical expertise, entrepreneurial grit, and visionary thinking. His latest venture, Soltech Health, is changing the game in sleep technology, not by tracking sleep, but by actually improving it. Dan's technology doesn't ask you to change your behavior or meditate for an hour a day. Instead, it works while you sleep using proprietary biofeedback and magnetic frequency stimulation to restore deep healing rest, the kind of sleep that supercharges your brain, body, and business performance. With over 30 patents and a deep understanding of how sleep impacts cognition, focus, and stress, Dan is here to show high-performing leaders how to reclaim their health without slowing down their momentum. Whether you're building a company, managing a team, or scaling towards your next liquidity event, Dan's insights will change how you think about rest, recovery, and sustainable success. And before we start the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Deep Wealth and the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. Here's Sanjay, a graduate of Deep Wealth Mastery, and he says, the investment I made in the Deep Wealth Mastery Program, it's a rounding error compared to the value created today and the future value I'll receive. Or how about William, who says, and I love this, a company that's attractive to sell is also a great one to own. The Deep Wealth Mastery Program gives me the best of both worlds. Now, speaking of growth and adding value, check out what Leon says. He says that the Deep Wealth Mastery Program changed how and who we hire. We've now begun to hire talent today that we never would have hired if it weren't for the program. The talent we're hiring today is helping both increase our growth and profits and our future enterprise value. Man, I love that kind of feedback because it's that kind of feedback that's what gets me out of bed every day. Deep Wealth Mastery System, it's the only system based on a 9-figure deal. That was my deal. And as you know, I said no to a 7-figure offer, created a system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery. And that's what helped myself and my business partners welcome from a different buyer, a different offer, a 9-figure deal. So if you're interested in growing your profits, preparing for a future liquidity event, whether that's 2 years away or 22 years away, and if you want to optimize your post-exit life, Deep Wealth Mastery is for you. Please email success@deepwealth.com. Again, that's success, SUCCESS, at deepwealth.com. We'll send you all the information about Deep Wealth Mastery, otherwise known as the Scale for Ultimate Sales System. That's where you want to be. You want to be with other successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders just like you who are looking to create market disruptions. Whether you're a startup, whether you've been in business for 3 or 4 decades, whether you're manufacturing, whether you're high-tech, SaaS, low-tech, whatever the case may be, come in and network with other business owners, with other businesses just like you, because they all want to lock in their financial freedom and enjoy both success and fulfillment. Again, that's a 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It has your name on it. All you need to do is take the next step. Please send an email to success@deepwealth.com. Deep Wealth Nation, welcome to another episode of the Deep Wealth Podcast. And I have a question for you, actually a few questions for you, Deep Wealth Nation. Would you love to take your business to the next level? What if I told you that unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, you're actually holding yourself back, and there's this one thing that you can do that can make all the difference in the world? My next question for you, Deep Wealth Nation: what would it be like for you to not only cross that finish line successful, but make sure that you're here and you're able to enjoy that both health-wise, mental-wise, every which way for many years? Is that of interest for you? And of course, you're saying yes to both, Jeffrey. Sign me up. Where do I begin? That's exactly what we're doing today. We have a very special guest in the House of Deep Wealth. Dan, welcome to the Deep Wealth Podcast. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. You have quite the story, and there's always a story behind the story. So Dan, what's your story? What got you from where you were to where you are today?
I started out as a neurologist, but I got there because I was fascinated by the difference between brain and mind. And so I had to decide, do I want to go into neurology or psychiatry? And quite frankly, I thought the psychiatrists were not exactly right in the head. So I moved into neurology. I figured I'd learn about the brain. And then after I became board certified, I moved right into business as opposed to a practice. And we made the first automated brainwave monitor to help prevent strokes during high-risk surgery. Then we migrated that hardware into sleep medicine. And at the time, there were only 300 labs globally. And 10 years later, there were 3,000, most of which were using our equipment. And then one day, this guy walks into my office with literally a Curad Band-Aid with a piece of plastic glued on top of it. And immediately it was like, oh my God, this is a brilliant invention. And that became the Breathe Right nasal strip. And so my board almost fired me. I mean, imagine we were a public company and Capital Medical Equipment, and then the CEO licensed what they call a nose Band-Aid. And so they were not pleased. They told me, say, you like this so well, replace yourself in the sleep business and you launch it. And so I knew nothing about CPG, but I figured it out. And then essentially after we sold that business, I started another because I learned something in medical school that really bothered me. And what they taught was that 75 to 90% of all medical conditions are either caused by or made worse by chronic stress. And so I would ask my professors, why aren't we treating chronic stress as a primary pathology? And they had good answers. They basically said, hey, look, the regulator of stress is sitting down low in the brain, right in the middle of the head. If we tried to approach it in any way, you'd cause brain damage. And even if you did do something directly with it, you'd probably kill the patient, number one. Number two, this part of the brain evolved 500 million years ago. And as the rest of the brain evolved on top of it, it borrowed some of the same neuroreceptors and transmitters. And so from a pharmaceutical standpoint, targeting this area essentially affects so many areas that the side effects were nuts. So my partner and I said, you know what, let's see if we can solve this. So we put $10 million into R&D. And it took us an incredible amount of time to figure this out because you couldn't find this in the textbooks. This was an unsolved mystery. So it involved a number of discoveries, and it literally took us 17 years to work through the problem. And then we solved it. And we also realized that affecting this area of the nervous system also regulates the sleep stages. And so we had a nice consumer product, but it also has a number of medical applications. So we're at a point now where, do you want to take your business to the next level? Or in this case, are you even the right company to take it to the next level? Should you find a successor company that could take it to the world? And that's where we're at.
Okay, wow. So there's a lot going on there. And then you come to the right place. In the House of Deep Wealth, we're all about building our businesses, selling the businesses down the road, raising capital, getting some investment in. And at the same time, we're also, how do I make sure that my health is actually my first wealth? And what I love about your story, we're really at the intersection of both areas. And so really from your side of things, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, Jeffrey, I'm an inventor. I figure things out that people haven't figured out before, and Breathe Right with the nasal strips. Love that in terms of what you did there. You brought that to the marketplace. Later on, you sold that when the time was right, and you improved the health. And now you've taken your focus on, and you can say, Jeffrey, on base or off base. To me, sleep is the biggest underrated superpower that we have. Because in my books, you can be eating all the right things. You can be doing all the right workouts. You can be doing all the meditations in the world that you want. But if you're not getting it right on the sleep side, you're missing out quite a bit, and you're not going to get likely those optimal results that you want. That sleep is so key to everything that we do, but we tend to take it for granted. And the best part of it, when you figure out how you can sleep, it doesn't cost a lot. It's free to sleep right. We all do. We all need to do it, but we somehow skip that step along the way. Thoughts about that, on base, off base, as I share that with you?
I think one of the factors that people don't realize about sleep, because most people they're not trained in the different sleep stages and what the different stages do. And here's the unfortunate thing about sleep. The most important stage of sleep is called delta sleep or slow wave sleep because it has the brain waves that are produced are really slow. Okay. And so let's just call it deep sleep. So really deep sleep. And we start losing that sleep in our 20s. Okay. It's shocking. Even by your mid to late 40s, you've lost 60 to 70% of your deep sleep. And by the way, you continue to lose it. And as you lose deep sleep, the incidence of having chronic illness grows. So it's a direct reciprocal correlation. All right. And so that was one of the big issues that we were facing. We knew that if we could stimulate this particular area of the brain, we could probably restore deep sleep. And we've been successful. We've proven that with over 300 cases. So we've got phenomenal statistics. And I'm a typical example. When we started this, I only had about 20 minutes of deep sleep. And now I average an hour and a half. So although I'm 72 years old, I have the deep sleep of a 30-year-old now. And let me tell you, Jeffrey, before this, I was on 4 cups of coffee a day. I was often taking naps because I was only sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. I don't care what anybody says. It's clear in the literature. It's clear in every study. You can't get by doing that without harming your body. It's not that everybody needs 8 hours, but the typical range is anywhere from 6 to 10 hours, depending on the individual. So, if you're one of those people that can get by with 6 and you have enough delta sleep, fine. But again, it's like a bell-shaped curve. So they're going to be at one extreme. The other extreme is 10 hours. Most people are around 7.5, 8 hours. And that's sleep time, not just time in bed. Because most people spend an hour longer in bed than they are asleep. You got to be careful about these kind of metrics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so again, Jeffrey, on base, off base, what I'm hearing you say, when it comes to sleep, it's not just sleep. We break sleep down into what some people may call the delta sleep or the deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, and a few other things all around. But as people age, naturally, for whatever reason, our deep sleep tends to decrease. And I'm also hearing you say that when our deep sleep is decreasing, when we're not getting the right amount, it begins to negatively impact us. So what would be some telltale signs? What's the canary in the coal mine kind of signs when unknowingly my deep sleep just isn't where it used to be, and I'm now seeing these kinds of symptoms?
One of the major functions of deep sleep is to cause growth hormone secretion. So for instance, as you lose growth hormone, you lose the ability for cell repair and cell regeneration. Okay, big issue. All right. Deep sleep even causes DNA repair, and it has a mammoth effect on the immune system. So your incidence of cancer goes up, all right, and infection, right, because your immune system is not functioning properly. The rest of your endocrine system is also regulated in this way. In deep sleep, you clear a lot of harmful proteins from the brain, so that issue occurs. Without deep sleep, your diet ends up running amiss because of cravings. And so you typically end up gaining weight. So the incidence of diabetes goes up, heart disease goes up. Essentially, it's a big negative, not getting not only enough sleep, but the right kind of sleep.
And let me ask you this, because for most entrepreneurs, you're really in a very coveted position relative to others. You've started businesses from scratch. You started with an idea. You've done things that people say cannot be done. So you've been there, and now you've been specializing in sleep, and we're going to talk all about what you're doing at Soltech and this incredible technology that you've invented and how it's changing lives. As an entrepreneur, though, you've grown a business, you've sold a business. You're in the process of doing some incredible things on the Soltech side in terms of where the next steps are and what that looks like. Can you share with the Deep Wealth Nation what that's been like for you on both sides of the spectrum, where your sleep was just off and what that meant to you as an entrepreneur and your decision-making abilities, your energy, compared to, yeah, everything's tracking. Yeah, maybe it's not perfect, but I can now see these discernible differences because I'm getting the right kind of sleep.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think most people would say that, you're not thinking well and this kind of thing. But for me, the most important thing about getting enough sleep was increased receptivity. And what I mean by that is, number one, you're not listening well. Okay, you're a little grouchy and you sort of get set in your path and you're not flexible enough. So when you're getting enough advice, certain signs are appearing that you're not willing to notice or just can't notice because of your fatigue. You end up making bad decisions or no decisions. You just sort of stick to your path. So receptivity from other people and sort of what you're seeing. If you're facing big headwinds, maybe you're moving in the wrong direction. And it's looking for those things, allowing them to affect you so that you can be flexible and adjust. Because I've rarely seen an entrepreneur who had the right idea right away and never had any obstacles. You have to overcome the obstacles. And the only way you do that is changing path, changing course a little bit, adjusting. And that requires flexibility and receptivity.
Dan, as you're talking about that, that really resonates. What doesn't get talked about enough out there in the entrepreneurial circles is that, yes, there's always exceptions where you have a relatively young entrepreneur who, okay, they're under pressure. They have built a terrific company and they're going to be selling that company, but they're still relatively young and their sleep architecture likely probably not great, but it's not bad either. Relative to the majority of entrepreneurs, they've built their business over a number of years, maybe even decades. They're now looking to sell this business or bring in some investors into the business, but this is their financial freedom. They've got one chance to do it. And because they're up there in age, they're probably unknowingly not getting the best sleep. And to your point, they're impaired from sleep, believe it or not, that they're not necessarily making the best decisions or they're not perceiving things the way that they should be because they got that mental fog or they don't have that energy because their sleep is just wrong in so many ways they don't even know it, yet they're making decisions that for the next chapter of their life, financial freedom, their legacy, their employees, their team, their family. Wow, talk about putting it on the line and really in some ways gambling, if I can use that word, all from not having the right sleep architecture. Thoughts about that?
There comes a point when you have to sort of look at yourself and say, what am I doing? And what do I want out of life? And how do I want to be? And so that generally requires sort of sitting back and taking a bigger picture, or sort of that view from 30,000 feet where you can say, okay, I see me now. Do I want to be like this? Is this going to help me? So a lot of it starts by stopping, where you just simply sit back and say, oh, okay, it's time for a review. And I've often found that take a couple days off, be alone, reflect, get enough sleep during that time, take it easy, and don't do any work. Leave your phone in another room, or just basically cut yourself off and allow yourself to regroup.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. And easier said than done, as simple as it sounds, not to confuse simple with simplicity. A lot of people just can't do it. And it's actually a great segue into what you're doing at Soltech with your real-time sleep stage enhancement and the technology behind that. And I want to share one observation before we jump into exactly what it is that you've done and what that means for the people who are now using your technology to take their health and their life to the next level. So for myself, as an example, I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to throw some things out there. I have a ring that's a wearable, which tracks sleep. I have a mattress topper, which cools down my mattress. It also tracks sleep and does all kinds of things with that. And as good as they are, and as terrific as the insights that they give me, when I was reaching and researching and reaching out to you guys and looking into, okay, what does Soltech do exactly? What dawned on me that I never really thought of before was, as great as my wearable is, and as great as my mattress topper that cools me down at night is, it's really the tip of the iceberg because it's not necessarily changing anything about me. So I get to see how I slept last night, and that's more or less about it. Nothing is really improving. Maybe the mattress topper can help me in a few areas, but relative to really being able to have game-changing results, get back to what my sleep would have been like if I'm 20 years old, just to pick an age, that all the technology that we hear about, that we see the headlines about, these wearables, these beds, everything else that go along with that, yes, they help, no two ways about that, but they're not necessarily the game-changing thing that people really would need to get back from, if they're 62, back to when they're 22, just to throw some numbers out there. How am I doing with that? Thoughts about that?
You're a lot smarter than most people out there. I can tell you that right now. Even the people in those companies that are selling the wearables, because I've talked to a lot of them, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Your thing actually helps people sleep better. They're so stuck on looking at their wearables. There's a new disease state that's been defined based on wearables. It's called orthosomnia. Yes. People that get fixated on the numbers and they get so annoyed that they end up not using it because it's making them feel bad. So yeah, ours is quite different. What we've done is we've learned how to stimulate the particular areas of the nervous system that regulate sleep. Nobody's ever done that before. This is a major league discovery. I don't publish medical articles. We write patents. This is a business. And so it's all covered there. You can start reading them as they issue. But essentially, what we've been able to do is we learned the language of the nervous system, which is frequency. And so we entrain certain areas to function at a higher level. And one of the reasons we lose delta sleep, for instance, over time is we lose those neurons. And so we're able to stimulate the area that initiates regrowth of those neurons. It's called neuroplasticity. And when you learn a new skill, you basically grow new circuits. Okay, so the nervous system has that dynamic capability. Well, in our case, we're stimulating an area, and the northbound fibers, there's 4 different stops along the way, and they cause regrowth in each stage. And so even after a couple of years of use, that circuitry is still regrowing, and you're getting better and better sleep. So that's really key. And so the way we do it is a couple ways. One is, you mentioned it, real-time sleep stage enhancement. So we made a wearable too, and that wearable tells us when the person is moving towards, let's say, I'll use deep sleep as an example. It looks like when it's starting to move in a certain direction, we say, okay, the person's moving into deep sleep. And then it sends a signal from the wearable, a Bluetooth signal, a quick one, a fraction of a second, to the magnetic generator under the bed, which is placed sort of under your feet or calves, right in that area. And that puts out the specific frequencies that are tuned to produce deeper sleep. And then once it gets into deep sleep, it says, okay, we've arrived. Now we know what the next circuit step is to even deepen the sleep further. So we shift the frequencies there, okay, to really prolong and deepen deep sleep. And along the way, over time, that causes nerve regrowth. And so you get deeper and deeper sleep. On the other hand, the range of frequencies in the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, which regulates these processes, is very narrow. But even within that narrow bandwidth, you and I may not operate at exactly the same center point frequency. So we do a calibration the first 5 nights to see where you operate versus where I operate, and then we center your stimulus accordingly. So the frequencies are user specific in addition to sleep state specific. And then every 12 sessions, we make an adjustment if there needs to be, because we do change over time. And sometimes they're short. And if you're in a stressful period, your frequencies are going to shift a little lower. And so we want to track that because we need to meet you where you're at to be able to then move you into that stage effectively.
Okay. So let me try and get this straight in terms of what you're saying. Let me just do a little bit of recap. And again, Jeffrey on base or off base. And I'm going to use an analogy to preface this. So Deep Health Nation, I am not a car guy. I can't change the oil in my car, and I don't know how the engine works. All I know is I go into my car, and depending on the kind of car you have, you either put a key into ignition, you turn it, or you push a button, and the car turns on. And magically, somehow, it just moves and it works. And so, Dan, it's a similar kind of thing here. We don't have to necessarily get into all the technology and the architecture that you put into this. But from what I'm hearing you say is you've really created this special technology using magnetic frequencies, completely safe. It's not like the frequency I'm getting from a cell phone or a Wi-Fi router or all those other things we hear in the headlines that are incredibly scary and can harm us. So using magnetic frequencies, you're able to positively influence both in the brain and in our bodies, the neurons and what we need to sleep. And you're able to make that better by customizing it to what specifically is going on with whomever's using it, based on you're wearing some kind of a special wristband or watch that you've created that's doing all the readings of the body, I presume, and sending it back to the unit. The two are talking back and forth together to come up with a custom sleep architecture for me through your technology to have me sleep better over time. How am I doing with that big picture wise?
I think you did a great job. And you're right. It's a closed loop feedback system. So we're always monitoring, making adjustments. The generator puts out the right frequencies. So throughout the night, it's delivering what you need to facilitate better sleep.
Okay. And so with that, in real time, it's seeing what's going on. You have your algorithms behind the scenes. You are the sleep guy. From my research, again, Jeffrey on base or off base, you actually created the way that most of the sleep clinics today, how they understand sleep, what they're using, what they're doing. You're one of the original people back in the day who figured all this out and what we need to do to be able to really, okay, here's a brainwave pattern that I'm picking out. This is what it means. Okay, this is a sleep stage that I'm in. So you've been involved with sleep for decades. And now instead of just observing it through Soltech and what you're doing with the technology, you're now able to positively influence it. So if I've developed some bad sleep habits along the way, you're able to, if I'm willing to, reverse that and get me back to a better place potentially. How am I doing with that?
Yeah, no, that's basically is it. And what's really nice is the same area of the nervous system affects chronic stress. So, that as I said before, that's why we got into it. But what was interesting in the process of doing that, we realized we had to make a technology where the user didn't have to devote any time to it because otherwise they wouldn't do it. And so for our chronic stress, subjects, they just put it under their desk while they're at work. They can do other things. They could do their email, they could talk on the phone, and this thing is operating, and all they had to do is push a button to do it, and it will relax them.
We all know that stress, when you read any of these peer-reviewed research papers, most diseases, it starts with stress. That's where it kind of doesn't manifest as stress, but it starts with stress, whatever that disease is. And so I'm just thinking of, Dan, let's forget the sleep side for just a moment. With these magnetic frequencies, with this box, this black box that you've developed, if I'm having problems meditating, if I'm just saying, it's just not for me. I've tried the apps, I've tried these different kinds of things. I don't know, it just doesn't really fit with me. Through Soltech and what you've developed with the magnetic frequencies, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, Jeffrey, this can help you relax. This can help you unwind. You can have your own Soltech session, if you will, to help you de-stress, relax, forget going to sleep at nighttime. This is during the day when you can use this. And I suspect I'm probably going to have a better day once I de-stress and unwind and get into a better place mental-wise, and my clarity of thinking and my energy. How am I doing with that?
Yeah, that's correct. A big reason people can't meditate well is, you have to be able to relax first. Okay. If you can't relax, you're never going to get there, because if you're operating from the sympathetic side, fight or flight, you're going to be too preoccupied with thought and you're going to be too vigilant. Okay. Good meditators can clear their mind because they've already gotten stress. So then the next step is, all right, let me move into no thought. And so if you can't get to that point where you've reduced the level of tension and vigilance, then, you're not going to become a reasonable meditator.
And from a very high level, Dan, as you're talking about this, I'm sure there's some people in Deep Wealth Nation who are hearing us talk and saying, come on, a magnetic wave, I can't see this thing, I can't touch this thing. How good could that really be? It sounds way out there. This sounds like science fiction, but not in the best way. How in the world could a magnetic wave make me sleep better, or even not have to have me meditate, but actually have me relax? So what's some of the science, very high level, Dan, behind this specific magnetic frequency that you're using, and how you put that into motion with the technology that you created?
Actually, the science began in the 1960s. There was this orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Robert Becker, and the guy was fascinated by salamanders and rejuvenation of limbs. And so he defined what he called the DC perineural system. In other words, the cells that surround nerves, they're called glial cells, and they make up over half the nervous system. Okay. So think of the nervous system twofold. It's binary. The nerves either fire or they don't. But then these glial cells determine the likelihood that they'll fire. And they have the same apparatus as nerves in terms of sodium potassium pump. And so the glial cells regulate the amount of extracellular ions, sodium and potassium, and that either makes the neuron more or less likely to fire. And so if the neurons are used to firing at a particular rate, and you create a current that oscillates, that polarizes up and down on the glial network, you'll either supply or take away the supply of what the nerve needs to fire. And so if the nerve needs to fire at 1 hertz and you regulate the glial system at 1 hertz, the nerve will be much more likely to fire. That's the science. It's actually, the science is very clear. Nobody figured out how to deliver that. And you don't do it with electromagnetism. There's a big difference between electromagnetism and magnetism. All right. For instance, you can't go to the low frequencies you need to influence nerves with electromagnetism unless you what's called amplitude modulate a faster frequency. And that kind of screws up the migration of these ions through the molecules that comprise the sodium potassium channel. So you have to use magnets and oscillate them at very low frequencies that match the user and the particular cells you wish to influence. Before we started, the process was called entrainment, but it was only theoretical. And so with our proof, we now have created a practical implementation.
So let's go back to an earlier point in the conversation. where we were talking about the negative side effects when we're not sleeping. And then when we do sleep properly, what that means for us in terms of our performance. And again, I want to turn to you, Dan, as a successful entrepreneur, because you've been on both sides of the coin. And for that skeptic out there in the Deep Wealth Nation who's saying, okay, I'm not so sure about these magnetic frequencies. I'll take at your word, Dan, that you say it is what it is. Not quite sure I really understand it, but if you say it works and it's been proven, okay, terrific. But what's in it for me? Tune into the world's favorite radio station, FM. What's in it for me? So from a very high level, for a type A, hard charging, successful yet busy, distracted, and stressed entrepreneur, founder, business owner, no guarantees, and everyone's health, it's their own journey, and we're all different. We're really an N+1, and this is not medical advice. We're simply sharing our opinions and our experiences and our thoughts with one another. But what could potentially happen for someone who, yeah, they're successful on the business side, but their health is faltering, and maybe they're not as successful on the business side as they could be if they got their health in check, but they don't know where to begin, where to start, and what to do with the Soltech and the magnetic frequencies that's going on with that. What could they potentially see? What would that look like?
You can use it for both kinds of applications, stress and sleep. What's interesting is most people are aware of their sleep, so they know how bad that is. But Jeffrey, if I asked you, what's your stress level right now? You would say it's normal because it's normal for you. But if you experienced no stress, then you'd realize the level of stress you're experiencing right now is, hey, wait a minute, this is not no stress. Okay. So understanding what no stress feels like is key. And using the system for that and getting to that point is vital. And it doesn't take that long. And so then you realize, oh my God, I'm spending a lot of time in stress mode and I'm not functioning well in stress mode, or even worse. That's really going to create disease. The little term stress kills, that's absolutely true. It just takes a while and you don't realize you're doing it to yourself over time. All right. So that's one big thing. The other is, again, sleep. We all need it. People need at least 6 hours of sleep. And that should really include, if you're at optimal health, 1.5 to 2 hours of deep sleep. And the vast majority of people don't get that.
Earlier, you're saying, at least for yourself, and I'm sure you're not alone with this, before you began with Soltech and having this technology, your deep sleep, instead of being 2 hours or even 1.5 hours, it was at 20 minutes. And I suspect you're not alone with that. More people, the farther down this journey called life that they are, probably the shorter their deep sleep is going to be. Thoughts about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you lose it. And so that typically by the time you're in your 70s or 80, you've lost almost all of your deep sleep. And by that point, you've probably accumulated 2 chronic illnesses.
What's crazy about that, and I find it so ironic, at Deep Wealth and in the Deep Wealth community, we work with so many entrepreneurs that they started the business not just for a lifestyle, but also for their legacy and for the financial freedom. And they have visions that, God willing, down the road, if they have children, they'll spend more time with their children and their grandchildren. And yeah, they're working away on the business. But when the time comes that the business is in the chapter past, they've sold it, they've passed it along, whatever that case may be, that they're going to be there to now enjoy the golden years. Grandkids, traveling with their spouse, friends, all those other kinds of things. But what's absent from that is there's this big assumption that they're going to be healthy, that they're going to be mobile, that they're going to be able to move, that they're going to be able to pick up a grandchild and not be in pain. And for so many, it's really a tragic kind of story because maybe they're successful on the business side, but when they do get there, they can't do some of these things that they thought they would. And all the money in the world at that point isn't really the answer. It's not going to help. And then as we're talking, the other thing that came to mind, and you can, Jeffrey, on base, off base with this, when we're stressed, as so many people are, it's interesting. What do most people do when they're stressed? I will turn to some kind of drink, perhaps alcohol, or I'll take this substance and that'll help me de-stress. Or yeah, tough day today, I'm going to have some kind of a drink, or I'm going to take this sleeping pill to help me sleep. And we all know that the science shows, maybe you fall asleep, but the quality of sleep, the architecture of sleep that you're having is actually terrible relative to just sleeping on your own and sleeping naturally. And we're actually one step forward, 10 steps back when we go outside of ourselves into different substances to try and help us relax or sleep. Thoughts about that?
It's been well documented that sleeping pills actually reduce your deep sleep. So since deep sleep is the most important stage of sleep, you don't want to take something that decreases it. Alcohol, on the other hand, can help you get to sleep, but then you'll have frequent awakenings. And so you're less likely to sleep long enough. And that doesn't necessarily help your deep sleep either. So those are all solutions that are not really great solutions.
The Soltech technology, it's working in the background. I'm now sleeping. And really, when it comes to sleep, there's a few things. You've talked about deep sleep. One of the things that we haven't spoken about that I know for many people, they're waking up and they can't get back to sleep. Perhaps they can go to sleep just fine. Pillow hits the head, 15 minutes later, boom, they're sleeping. Maybe it's 3 in the morning, though, that famous 3 a.m. wake-up call. They're not going back to sleep so easily, and now they're tossing and turning, and they just have a terrible sleep after that. With your technology, what's going on in that kind of a scenario? Does it help me sleep through the night better? Can I expect longer durations of sleep?
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points. So let me cover it in several ways. First of all, remember I said that we literally grow back circuits. So some people will buy our equipment and then they'll expect it to work like a sleeping pill, and they use it the first night and they say, this is not working. Okay. If your audience is listening and they think that's going to happen, please do not purchase our equipment. Okay. Because, almost everybody that buys it needs to regrow cells. And depending on how bad your brain is, we found that takes anywhere from a month to 6 months. Okay. So you can't use this and think it's going to work right away. All right. And you need to use it regularly. If you use it one day a week and for 6 months, that's not using it for 6 months. All right. And that's really key. Okay. Second thing to realize is that getting deep sleep, most of deep sleep occurs in the first half of the night. And there's a phenomenon called sleep inertia, okay, which comes as a result of deep sleep. So when you've had deep sleep in the first half of the night, you're more likely to stay asleep longer. And so that's great. All right. And your sleep during that period of time is what we call more consolidated. In other words, you're staying asleep rather than waking up. Now, a lot of us have to go to the bathroom at some time during the night. Okay. But even if you have to get up once, imagine sleeping in 2 solid blocks before and after. Great. Right. Now, what we've also put in the system is we know when you woke up. Okay. And so we initiate what's called back to sleep frequencies. So in addition to using frequencies that affect the deep brainstem area that regulates sleep, we also use some frequencies that affect the cortex. It's like a magnetic sleeping pill just to help you get back to sleep faster. One other point to make, and that is people say, if I'm getting as much deep sleep as I got when I was 30, why am I not sleeping like I'm 30 every night? And my response is, are you as active every day as you were when you were 30? And they go, well, no. I said, your body's responding also to your level of activity. The more active you are, the more that tells your body that you need more deep sleep, and the more consolidated your sleep will be. So you have to take all of these things into account in understanding how your sleep's going to be. If you maintain good exercise practices and you go to bed at sort of the same time every night or thereabouts, you will have more consistent sleep. And over time, you'll get deeper and deeper sleep, more duration of it.
And so then you bring up a terrific point, actually a few of them. And so for starters, someone who's looking for a magic bullet, that they can take this magic pill, so to speak, and the next day everything's perfect, not happening. This can take, depending on the person, it could take up to 6 months, perhaps a little bit less, perhaps a little bit more. Having said that, though, Dan, we also have to take into account this is years, this is decades in the making of the challenge that most people are having when they're not having terrific sleep. And the fact that it can even be fixed in that period of time is absolutely amazing in and of itself from that perspective. But you've also shared some other terrific things. While the Soltech technology, it can help me on the sleep side if I'm not eating properly, if I'm not exercising at all, if I'm just a couch potato. What I'm hearing you say is there's only so much that you're going to be able to do. That yes, you can certainly help on the sleep side. That said, though, there's other parts like the exercise, like the diet, the mindset, my thoughts, all these other things. It's really an entire system of things. I really need to be cognizant or mindful of all those other areas. And if I can do that, if I can put that together, that's where the real magic begins to happen. Thoughts about that?
You're absolutely correct. Think about exercise for a second. Let's say you're doing a little bit of weightlifting. When you do that, you're actually you're destroying some of the cells. You're rupturing them. All right. Now, those cells need to be repaired. So they send a chemical messenger that tells the brain, hey, you know what? I need some help. And the brain then says, good, I'm going to give you more delta sleep, more deep sleep, because that's what deep sleep does, is it helps repair cells and regenerate cells. So again, that ties in greater consistency if you're exercising more regularly. And so you're right. You have to do everything if you really want to improve your health. It's not just better sleep and reduce stress. Don't get me wrong. Those are probably, in my opinion, the two biggest factors. But exercise, really, maintaining activity is very important.
And all that said, for me, all roads lead back to sleep. Because again, like we started off this conversation, yes, I should be having the right diet. And yes, I should be moving regularly, having some kind of an exercise regime. We're not talking hours in the gym. It could be taking some walks around the block after having some meals, and throughout the day, taking some breaks and walking around, just being reasonable, being out in the sunlight. That said, though, when I get a good night of sleep, everything else gets enhanced, from my decision-making ability to my clarity to my energy. And this isn't coming from you. This is coming from all the studies that are out there, Dan. And again, would love for you to share on base or off base. When they look at what happens to bad sleep, I don't have great sleep. I'm not getting a lot of sleep. I'm hearing things like, well, sure, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, other kinds of diseases begin to come when we have that bad sleep, because it just throws the body into such a disarray. Our blood glucose levels go up. We're hungry. We're gaining more weight now, all because of one bad night of sleep. Now we have night after night of just poor sleep. My goodness, we just have to look out to the population and see what's going on there. It's little wonder why we're seeing what we're seeing on the overall health side, because of the degradation of sleep. And we haven't even gotten into our phones and the computers and the screens and all the blue light at nighttime, throwing us all off, and how that does affect sleep in not the best way. But there's so much going on with all of that. But back to what I said earlier, when we can get the sleep part right with Soltech, with the right kind of sleep hygiene, with the right kind of exercise, with the right kind of diet, other areas in our life are likely going to begin to put themselves back to where they should have always been, but we've forgotten what that's like. Thoughts about that?
Everything you said is right. I don't really have anything to say about that. There's one other issue that I think is key that most people don't realize. And this might sound strange to people, but we deal with a mind. Remember, I told you in the beginning, I was fascinated with brain versus mind. And a lot of people think that, well, mind just comes from brain. Okay. And there's really more to it than that. And we operate from an ego structure, and most people don't take the time to understand the root cause of psychological illness. Okay. And this is the foundational element of chronic stress. Okay. You really need to get down to that level. And most people don't realize that we actually all have the same problem. Okay. Because before we grow up, we're babies, then we're small children. And all of our behavioral interactions at some point or another will cause us to start developing defense mechanisms. And what that is telling your egoic self is not good enough. I'm unlovable. And so this self-identification with ego and that core belief is the root cause of these kinds of problems. And so in the process of getting better sleep and reducing stress, you're now positioned to start to address this core issue and say, do I really believe it? And how do I deal with that and get rid of the issues that cause my defensiveness, et cetera?
And Dan, as you're sharing that in Deep Health Nation, let me share something with you, something to think about. So with Dan, I know, Dan, I've been calling you Dan, you've been very kind that way, but you're a doctor, you're a neurologist, you bring a unique spin to this. You're also a successful entrepreneur. And part of your mission now, your latest focus has been on, let me help other entrepreneurs or people in general, society. Let me get rid of one of the biggest performance killers in business today, and that's poor sleep. because when we get the sleep right, there's a better to good chance that we're going to get the business side right. We're going to get our personal life right. We're going to be feeling better. We're probably not going to be as sharp as we should be with family members and our loved ones because we're just cranky or tired or our mental faculties aren't quite there. That you're really out there to elevate the biggest underrated superpower that we have, otherwise known as sleep, with your thesis being when we can help people sleep better, they can sleep longer, they can have more of a full night's sleep, more of the deep sleep from a neurology side, from a physical side, from a mental health side, everything else begins to work itself out in the right way. And it really doesn't get more effortless than what you've done. It's a box that goes, as I understand it, at the end of my bed. I'm wearing a wristwatch that you've developed at nighttime when I go to bed, and it's really a set it and forget it. I don't have to worry about what's going on. I just let the system know that I'm going to sleep now. It does the rest. It's tracking me. It's adjusting things as needed. It's seeing my patterns. It's seeing my sleep architecture. And over time, it just fine-tuned things to give me the optimal opportunity to get the best kind of sleep so I can get the best kind of life. Thoughts about that?
You're right. I mean, it's essentially a magnetic generator that goes on the floor, typically under the bed or by the floorboard. You put on the wearable. It has an app. You turn it on, and that's it. You forget about it. And in the morning, you turn it off, and then you can see your data. And you can see the trended data over time so that you could see your level of progress over weeks and months. And it's pretty simple, but we do provide a much more complete report than the other wearables because this is really dedicated to sleep and stress reduction. So it's not about fitness, et cetera. But again, we had to make it so it does it to you. So in a sense, it's like a pill in that a pill you take, this you turn on.
Effortless, easy. The science is proven, it's behind it. Your very unique perspective on that and what you brought to that. 2 last questions before we go into wrap-up mode. Dan, as you look to the future in terms of Soltech, this technology, what can be done with it? If you fast forward 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, what would you like to have seen happen with what you've created?
That's a question I love because we've learned to speak to a part of the nervous system. There are other parts of the nervous system that can be addressed, which would stimulate the same kind of growth. So we're ready to move this technology along to a larger company that has a global footprint that can sell it. But by the same token, what I want to see is there's so much more development that could come to treat a host of neurologic illnesses and other problems that are related. For instance, stress-related diseases, we can take care of those. We've even found in a clinical study done by a third party that this works for peripheral neuropathy. Not only just taking away the pain, but also we've seen the onset of sensory restoration. So we're seeing the nerves regrow as long as they're not too badly damaged. Obviously, a diabetic that's already had amputations, we're not going to have that much improvement there. But in people with mild or even moderate, there can be dramatic improvement. So we see improvement across the board with this kind of technology. And the beauty is the FDA does not consider it any kind of safety hazard. So for consumer applications, as long as we don't make medical claims, there's no FDA clearance or approval that's required. Obviously, when we move to other medical conditions, we do need clearance, but at least safety is not an issue.
Interesting. And so as I'm hearing your vision, what I'm hearing you say is this is really the tip of the iceberg. What you've done here, this very same technology can be applied in a certain way that can go to so many other areas, and perhaps partnering with the right kind of company or looking at different areas, you can now take this and really make a meaningful difference for people having different kinds of health challenges out there.
Essentially, this technology will start a whole new industry. And for some people, and they won't like it because it'll also take business away from them. But, hey, look, that's what happens when new advancements occur.
Absolutely. And we haven't got into AI, artificial intelligence. That's a whole other episode that we could do on that. And I know I said I only had one more question after this one, but I will ask since you brought up technology and I put in there AI. How does AI or does AI play a role right now with what you're doing? Or is there a potential for AI in everything that we've been talking about and Soltech?
We are using AI in the form of machine learning to essentially personalize the signal for you. Okay, that's done that way. We use a level of AI in the staging algorithm, again, based upon your data over time. So all of that is learning in the process. So it is being used that way.
Okay, great to hear. And my last question, promise before we go into wrap up mode here, there are so many questions that I didn't ask. Is there one question that I didn't ask? Anything that comes to mind, something that you'd like to share or get an answer out there with the Default Nation that we haven't yet covered?
I think for all of the entrepreneurs out there, we touched on it. It's that receptivity.
Mhm.
It's like that open-mindedness, and don't close yourself off to possibilities, and be watchful for signs that come your way and ask yourself, what does that mean? Or what could it mean? So it's not like change your mind every 2 minutes, but it's just be watchful, watch the trends, and make a determination internally if you're on the right path for you and your company.
And I'll add to that, really, one of the best ways you can do that is taking care of yourself, taking care of your health, going back to that full night of sleep. And Default Nation, Dan said this a number of times. I hope you picked up on it. If you want to get 7 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep, Dan, I'll use myself as an example. My goal is to get as close to 8 hours as possible. Sometimes I'll get 8.5, sometimes I'll get 7.5, but I'm typically in bed for 9 hours. So from the time my head touches the pillow to the time I wake up, it's about 9 hours, and I have a decent chance of getting somewhere to that 8 hours. If I said, well, I'm going to just be in bed for 8 hours, I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep. Time to fall asleep. Perhaps I wake up, time to get back to sleep again, to give ourselves that luxury of having that time to be able to get a better night's sleep. And I love what you're doing, that we can actually maximize our time in bed, that we're getting a more productive, probably isn't the right word to use with sleep, but a more healthy kind of sleep, a longer kind of sleep. And so with that said, Dan, sadly, it's wrap up mode. I would love to keep on talking with you and going down these different rabbit holes. But that said, it's a tradition here on the Default Podcast. It's my privilege and honor to ask every guest the same question. And it's a fun one. Let me set this up for you. When you think of the movie Back to the Future, you have that magical DeLorean car that will take you to any point in time. So imagine now it's tomorrow morning, Dan. This is the fun part. You look outside your window. Not only do you see the DeLorean car curbside, the door is open, it's waiting for you to hop on in, which you do, and you're now going to go back to any point in time. Perhaps, Dan, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what would you tell your younger self in terms of life lessons or life wisdom? Or, hey, Dan, do this, but don't do that. What would that sound like?
When I was growing up and as a young adult, and especially as I became a neurologist, I lived in my head. And that is so limiting. And it took me a long time to focus on my feeling nature, both physically and emotionally. And I would say doing that is so vital, basically for a more fulfilling life, better relationships, and better intuition.
How would you do that? So you tell your younger self that. What would you tell your younger self in terms of getting out of your head, in terms of, hey, get out of your head and you'll enjoy life more. Here's something that you can try to help you do that. What would that sound like, or what would that look like?
I kind of took 2 steps. Okay. One was pay more attention to your body. How does your body feel itself, your physical body? Okay. That was the first.
Okay.
Then NIH in 1991 started what was called the Office of Alternative Medicine. Okay. They've changed the name since then to functional medicine, integrative medicine, whatever. But they defined a term in 1992 or 93, which was called the biofield. Okay. And this is an energetic field that permeates the body and is around the body. And they brought in a team of 4 people to equate this to other phenomenon. And it was interesting that they pointed to Eastern medicine, Eastern philosophy. And so in China, it's called Qi. In Japan, it's called Qi. In India, it's called Prana. It's the energetic self. And I've done a lot of experimentation, especially with this magnetism. We've had third-party engineers do a lot of testing to understand the relationship between what we produce and the biofield itself, which, by the way, is conductive for magnetic energy. Okay. And you can feel that. And most people can feel it if they just hold their hands up and focus on their palms, and the palmar aspect of their fingers. If you do that and focus on that, you can feel this slight tingling. And that's the interface between the biofield and your physical body. And what's fascinating is, as you learn to feel that more and more, you can start to feel it throughout all of you. And when you can feel your physical body and that biofield throughout all of you, you will be a different person. Okay. You will be more touched emotionally. You'll be more in touch with people. Physically, you'll be better coordinated,
Mhm,
because you'll be in your body, so to speak, and
mhm,
you'll be much more aware of that. And
mhm.
so I've learned and I've worked with a lot of people, even though I went into business, I still work with some people, professionally on a medical side. And as I've done this over the years, fascinating transformations occur. And so I would urge people to get out of their heads, more into their body, experience this other aspect of oneself. And it's a game changer.
Wow. My goodness, you left us on a cliffhanger just as we're wrapping up. You took us down a whole other rabbit hole of a fascinating area, but I absolutely love that advice. And as someone who is often too many times in my own head, instead of enjoying really what's around me and what you're talking about, that really does resonate. And then somebody has a question. Perhaps they're an investor. They want to take your technology to the next level. Perhaps they want to become a client and improve their sleep. Where would be the best place online for someone to reach you?
I think the easiest way is just use my email address. So it's dcohen, so DCOHEN at Soltech Health, which is SOLTECHEALTH.com.
Terrific. Deep Wealth Nation, my goodness, you heard it from the fellow entrepreneur, the doctor, the inventor, the terrific all around guy himself. Take Dan up on his offer, reach out to him. By the way, all of this will be in the show notes. It's a point and click, it doesn't get any easier. And Dan, that said, it's official. This is a wrap. Congratulations, as we love to say here at Deep Wealth. May you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
So there you have it, Deep Wealth Nation. What did you think? So with all that said, and as we wrap it up, I have another question for you. Actually, it's more of a personal favor. Did you find this episode helpful? Have you found other episodes of the Deep Wealth Podcast empowering and a game changer for your journey? And if you said yes, and I really hope you did, I have a small but really meaningful way that you can actually help us out and keep these episodes coming to you. Are you ready for it? The dramatic pause. I'll just wait a moment. Drum roll, please. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast channel. When you subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast, you're saving yourself time. Every episode automatically comes to you. And I want you to know that we meticulously craft every one of our episodes to have impactful strategies, stories, expert insights that are designed to help you grow your profits, increase the value of your business, and yes, even optimize your post-exit life and your life right now, whatever you want that to look like. And every time you subscribe and a fellow entrepreneur subscribe, it's a testament to how together, yes, we are changing the social fabric of society. One business owner at a time, one liquidity event at a time. So don't let the momentum stop here. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast channel. You'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear from the top industry leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that are really changing and shaping the business world. And maybe you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're taking a well-deserved break that we spoke all about on this episode. The Deep Wealth Podcast, it's your reliable source for the next big idea that could literally revolutionize your business. So once again, please hit that subscribe button, stay connected, inspired, and ahead of the curve. And again, your next big breakthrough moment, it might just be one episode away. Maybe it was even this episode. So all that said, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your wealth isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about the depth of your journey and the impact that you're creating. So let's continue this journey together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. God bless.